How do you make a good loop? That is the question, okay? I think that in order to make a loop as a solo guitarist, all right, this is going to be geared at those of us who are not playing with a band right now, okay? We're in here, we're thinking, I just want to workshop some ideas, maybe. I want to work on my own skills. I want to come up with something that's cool. So, what I think is you got to know your gear, okay? For me, what you're going to be seeing me use is going to be a Boss RC300, a Strat, and a Helix. That's all I've got. There's nothing fancy. There's nothing crazy. There's no no post, no nothing. This is just raw tracks right in here, just that you can see what I'm doing. I think the first thing is understanding that there is such a thing, and I know this is crazy, guitarists. I know this is insane. Okay, there is such a thing as too much sound. All right. What you gotta do is be really comfortable coming up with that chord progression, coming up with those ideas that sound really cool. If you're gonna jump in and let's say you decide you want to come up with like it doesn't. What I'm trying to get at is it doesn't necessarily matter how or what. You know what I mean? It's not gonna impact us much when we're just like workshopping an idea. It's just you might throw it away, you might keep it, who knows, right? The big thing that I can say is think about the space, think about the time, think about what you're going to be doing with this, because it is going to be the thing that changes everything else that you're about to layer. You know what I mean? So everything about looping is broken up into one big concept, is understanding space and time from a musical perspective. You really need to get into this idea that you need to pull what you want apart at the beginning, okay? What I mean by that is instead of going you can't have these giant blocky chords. What are you going to add to it? Think about like ways you can build up to this, okay? The way that I like to do this is, again, we've talked about this before, these 2-note chords I think are marvelous for something like this. So grab something really nice and chill and just kind of go, okay? From there, what you're going to do is you're going to loop that track, okay? So let's kind of take a look at what am I using down here. So I've got obviously a track that, my RC300 is set up, so I'm going to be using 2 tracks forward, and I've got one here that's set up to be doing a reverse on this. So, and the reason I like this, I'll show you in a second, is it adds an element of flavor to basically playing the same sound. That is one of the problems, you know what I mean, with obviously starting with a loop, is you got to think about like, how's your guitar going to sound and what's this going to do. So let's take a peek and just kind of figure out how we're going to play this progression together, and then let's kind of see what happens. Okay, this is not rehearsed, this is legit, just as live as it possibly can be, just for you. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to go, okay, I've got one track. Let's see if I can get the rhythm first try, right? Sounds pretty good. I chose to make sure that I wasn't doing anything with too much verb, too much delay right off the bat, because it's gonna, like obviously if the timing is out of sync or something like that, it's gonna really change how that feels, right? So the next thing for me is keeping the same idea, but maybe adding a different flavor to it. What does that mean, different flavor? So maybe you want to do like a strumming pattern, right? Or maybe you want to do like just a power chord or something with it, like So something like that sounds pretty neat. So we're following the same chords that we did, and what we're adding to that is literally just a root and a fifth, okay? So let's record that and see how it sounds. Now we've got this extra layer to it, which I think now we get to add some fun stuff. What I like is doing I have a patch on my Helix right here called swells. Now what this is going to be doing is it's basically doubled up on reverb and delays because I really like that sound. You know, this is not, you know, if your guitar style isn't like this, then obviously do whatever is going to work for you. You know, this is going to be one of those things where it's not necessarily about, you know, like if you're trying, like this isn't about trying to do like a different stylistic thing than what you're used to doing, right? Like this is about you being able to decide like, hey, what is my sound really like? And I think that's really the most important thing, you know. And if you are into looping, you get that it's this structure of you constantly building and taking away, and so you have to really be mindful of some of these things, right? The reason I put this on another track like you saw right here is because I could just pull back. So now I can kind of separate how things work. Last thing that we talked about was being able to add maybe some swells or something like this, right? I really think that this is awesome. Okay, so check this out. Now I've got this extra kind of sound to it. Now, what's fun about this RC300 is I've got control over every single thing that I'm doing from like a, you know, analog perspective right here. Like I've got the buttons to change it, right? I don't have to go in and do any presets. I don't have to worry about what it's doing, okay? I'm gonna pull that first track back a little bit because that's not the focus, right? Now here's something that I really dig, okay? I like taking an idea like this, and we don't even have to add like a different texture. That this is all the same thing so far, which I think is really fun. You know, let's figure out kind of what we want to add for this. Now check this out. I'm going to use this one that we talked about. I'm going to tell you what this is in just a second, okay? This one right here, track 3, is going to be a reversed track. Okay, so it's gonna reverse essentially the phrase. So let's see where we're at with that. What's fun about something like that is it's adding a different texture to what you've already got without having to change all of your pedals, right? So you don't have to do anything except just play, which I think is, when you're coming up with something like this right on the fly, I mean, I think it's really important to figure out what you've got underneath, you know, you like from your pedal board, you know, to this, like, what are you going to be doing right here? What kind of sounds do you got? What are they going to do? You know, for me, I might pull this back just a little bit because I don't think it needs to be out there too much. So you can see there's just a little bit. Let's say you're working on something like this and you're like you're almost done. You've got like almost 3 tracks down. You got this one and you're like, doesn't work. You know, what's nice about this one is I can instantaneously kind of pull it back and get ready for another one. So I'm gonna go, let's say I wanna go higher. Now maybe you're realizing, you know, like, because this takes a little bit of understanding how some of these things work in order to get the sound to be completely perfect. Maybe you're like, well, I didn't like how sharp some of those things felt, right? Because it does happen. I mean, it's going to take some of those phrases, flip them around for you, and you're not going to be expecting it, right? So maybe you just hold on a couple of notes, and I think that's a pretty safe setup. So check this out. And you can see something like that where you're, you know, again, the less is more idea, right? you're not really impacting the phrase. Now, this is where the fun part comes in. This is where I like, for me, this is where I'm working on maybe like melody ideas, or I'm working on like, some other stuff. Maybe I decide, I really need something that's like got like a little more oomph to it, right? Here's a fun patch. I'll stop this so you can check this out. This patch right here is like my piano / textures patch is what I'm using this for. So I've got like a lot going on with just being able to play one note. What this does for me is this puts in kind of like the bass roll in some ways. Without having to just have a bass on hand. Now obviously it's not going to sound like if I plugged in the bass and recorded it, but it gets it enough if I'm doing just a small loop like this where I can add and take away and it sounds pretty decent. So let's just see what happens if you add something like this to it. You can see it kind of fills out what was kind of missing in that track, right? Now, obviously, what you choose to do next is really going to be what you dig as a guitarist. I mean, for me, I'm gonna end up using my volume pedal here to really, really kind of play with where I want this sound to situate. And you can kind of see what I'm gonna end up doing is trying to find where's that sweet spot where I'm not overpowering the rest of the track, because I could bring it up at some point. So for me, I'm gonna start pretty low. I'm gonna be about 70% volume. And it's gonna be subtle. I mean, that's kind of the goal with some of this stuff. Now you're kind of workshopping what idea do you wanna add over this, right? And I think that kind of stuff ends up being really fun. That would be just what I would think a very, very awesome way to start your looping idea. Do something that again, kind of like really adds to you being able to build, and I think understanding like that, you can play just bits and pieces of chords. I think that's really important, bits and pieces of chords, and understanding that a lot of this stuff can be built and taken away and still have this like really cool adventure that you're taking the listener on. And so I think, what I hear a lot with looping, and when I get a lot of questions from my students who, are like, well, I've seen this on YouTube, or I watched this dude do this. And it's like, you have to understand there's a lot of things that come into play. One of them is, what is that person's style? Like that is such a huge thing right away that's going to change so much for you. Try to emulate you. Try not to worry about doing somebody else yet. Once you get this kind of stuff down, you could start to bring in some of those things that you think are going to be awesome, that you've heard from some of your favorite artists or some of your friends, right? Stuff like that I think is going to be really helpful. But for starting this project, I think you need to realize that when you come in with big blocky chords and big sounds, it's hard to add to that and not have it feel like you're just building up volume instead of building up a phrase and building up an actual melody. And I think that's probably the most important thing to take away from this is you're trying to use space and your idea to work together, right? So adding one or two things, doing one small change, instead of doing 6 different patches, right? 6 different pedals, 6 different sounds. It's like, instead of doing that right out of the gate, try to take the one thing that you've created and try to have like 3 tracks, right? So you're gonna do maybe your rhythm track. You're gonna maybe do like a cool accent piece with like, I used my thing would be the texture one, the piano texture pack that I kind of got there, where I've got all these cool sounds. That would be the accent piece for me. You know, add in maybe a different chord that works well with the one that you did, you know. So like if you're going to start with just a single note phrase, maybe add in a 2-note chord using your root and third, or a power chord with your root and 5, right? Try something like that and see if it works. I think sticking to some of those neutral sounds while you're learning this stuff is going to be better than trying to do like all of these crazy things, you know, in case you get weird tones that you're not used to yet. Try to stick with something that's a little more you know, allows you to hear where those mistakes are going to be made so you can fix them, because this is going to be a process of discovery. This is going to be something where you're not used to this if you haven't done it yet. And so trying to get the tracks set up and synced up alone is going to be an ordeal, right? Remember, your counting and your rhythm and your phrasing is going to be so much better after doing stuff like this. This really helps you as a guitarist. You know, and you get to play around basically with all the stuff that you already have. So I think that's what makes it way more interesting. So hopefully this was super helpful for you. Thank you guys so much. Have an awesome rest of the day.